Chapter 48. Don't play too crazy. So in order to avoid irritating her again this morning, Zicheng wanted to discuss with everyone what he had observed in the past few days before Wei Ran woke up. Zicheng stood up and stretched out his hand to Wei Ran. Wei Ran walked over and put her little hand in his warm big one, and sat beside Zicheng. Zicheng hugged her and frowned slightly. "Why don't you sleep a little longer?" Wei Ran pursed her lips and smiled. "I won't be able to sleep if you're not here." Then she patted Zicheng's face again. "The back of your hand to show that you are fine." She looked at the others and continued, "I guess this manager broke into the nest during an operation. There was a wound on his body that touched the egg fluid, and the egg fluid entered his body. It is also the special ingredient that is the only way to make the ability grow rapidly. Now everyone understands." Wei Ran seemed to have thought of something, and laughed a few more times. "Of course, the growth rate of the egg liquid and my red fruit's ability level is incomparable." Zicheng fondled her heart a few times. Jiang Nanfeng murmured fearfully, "Then, the manager of the Snow Mountain base is pushing a bunch of people to death for his own selfish desire." Zicheng pulled Wei Ran's catkin onto his lap to warm it and took it lightly, said, "In the last days, this is the case." At this time, Yan Yang brought Wei Ran a bowl of steamed egg and lean meat porridge, and Zicheng reached out to take it and fed Wei Ran spoonful by spoonful. At noon that day, the alarm sounded at the Snow Mountain base. Wei Ran took Yan Yang and ran to the courtyard for the first time to have a look, but she didn't see anything. Then he ran back to the house and asked Zicheng what happened, because Zicheng must have sensed the alarm when it sounded. Zicheng said in a fluttering voice, "It's just a high-level zombie who came in." Wei Ran got playful, grabbed Zicheng's hand and swayed it from side to side, and said coquettishly, "Brother, I want to go and have a look." As soon as Wei Ran put on such a coquettish look, Zicheng had nothing to do with her. But he still didn't forget to pick up the plush ear hat on the sofa and put it on for her. But Wei Ran, who had already been put on by Zicheng one after another, was now bloated like a piglet, unwilling to wear a hat, and kept dodging. Zicheng looked at her quietly, with an air of not taking it off without wearing it. In the end, Wei Ran pursed her mouth and threatened to submit to authority. When Zicheng put the hat on her, Wei Ran squinted at him to protest, but Zicheng couldn't see it. Wei Ran also pulled Yan Yang, Yan Yan also pulled Su Yi called Jiang Yanfeng. Zhang Yanfeng dragged the reluctant Yu Ming with him. Finally, in Chen Wei's sentence, "Don't play too crazy, watch the time and come back for dinner to watch the excitement in a mighty way." Because of the dense population on the back mountain, the high-level zombies came in and went straight to the back mountain. It was a few days after the guards noticed something strange in Hushan. It has been more than 10 minutes since Zicheng and the others reached the back mountain, but the high-level zombies were still not caught. Now the back mountain is being closed and checked one by one to prevent infected people from going out. For a while people were panicked, and there were many discussions. Isn't this base strictly guarded? I don't know why a high-level zombie was let in. I heard that they sneaked in a few days ago. There are 2 families and 10 people in the back mountain. They were all affected, and the neighbors felt that they hadn't seen anyone for a few days, so they were discovered. That won't spread. If the zombies are caught, they will be infected. I just saw the base manager. If you come out in person, it shouldn't be a big problem. Wei Ran also became curious about the manager when she heard the discussion of the crowd. Yan Yang, who was called suddenly, was stunned. She first subconsciously looked at Su Yi, who was also confused, and then looked at Zicheng. And Zicheng took Wei's sideways glance and said, "Use your ability to check where the high-level zombies are." Zicheng never asked Yan Yang who had the ability, but he knew. And Yan Yang never used her abilities in front of them, not because she didn't want to, but because she never had a chance. Since being with Zicheng, Wei Ran and the others, with the blessing of Hongguo, his ability has reached level 60. But because the ability she belongs to is rather complicated, and she has no chance to use the ability and she doesn't know how much she can use it. But I also know that Zicheng is giving her a chance to find out her own details. Oh, okay, Yang hurriedly replied. Then she turned the palm of her left hand inward, straightened the index finger and ring finger and bent the middle finger at 90 degrees. The thumb pinched the first knuckle of the middle finger, placed it under the chest, and closed her eyes. In her perception, only plants and her are left. The plants seemed to have said something to her. She opened her eyes suddenly, and immediately turned to look at the villa area. Yan Ying shook Su Yi's hand and stomped her feet in surprise and excitement. It's a female zombie, she is wearing white clothes, and she is going to the villa area now. This is the first time a plant has surrendered to her and used it for her own use. And at this moment, a seductive woman with big waves passed by them and paused, turned her head to look at them, with a flash of light in her eyes. The kitchen of the small villa is simmering and the seafood stew has been cooked in a big pot, and the aroma is overflowing from the living room. Chen Wei was sitting on the sofa reading a book in the living room, and then raised his hand to look at his watch. He frowned slightly. It's getting closer, and you haven't come back yet. He got up and walked out of the front courtyard, but he didn't see any sign of anyone coming back. Just about to turn around and go back, there seemed to be a faint cry for help from a distance. Chen Wei followed the sound and walked to a row of small villas next door. The cry for help became clearer and clearer, and finally stopped at a villa slightly larger than theirs. Because it was true that the cry for help came from here, in order not to startle the snake, Chen Wei saw that the fence door was wide open, and walked in directly. The living room on the first floor is tidy and there is nothing wrong with it. At this time there were successive calls for help from upstairs, followed by the sound of throwing things. Help. There are zombies, there are zombies. He walked up quickly, identified one of the rooms, and kicked it away. I saw a female zombie climbing out of the balcony with her stiff hands and feet and jumping down from the second floor. There was obviously someone hiding in the closet, so unfortunately she should have been discovered. When the female zombie sensed that someone was coming, she ran away quickly. No wonder the call was not heard for a while. It turned out that this person was hiding. Chen Wei also walked quickly to the balcony, but there was no sign of the female zombie. He probably jumped off and hid in a blind spot. He also jumped down to the second floor. Not long after the female zombie left the door, she met Zicheng and his party waiting at the door. Chen Wei also came out slowly to block behind it. The female zombie still wanted to escape. Zicheng waved his hands at the others, meaning that they would not attack. But she turned to look at Yan Yang and said coldly, Yan Yang, control those vines to strangle this zombie. Yan Yang was stunned. Although she did unlock the strangle skill after level 50, she never used it. She has no confidence to do well. Chapter 49. Inviting into the alien lair. Jiang Ran wore pink gloves and clenched her small hands into fists to encourage Yan Yang. Sao Yang, you can do it. Yan Yang was still not sure of herself, but Su Yu stroked her back gently. He said softly, it's okay, Zhao Yang, isn't there still me? Zicheng said calmly, adjust your breath, calm down, and maintain the strong belief that all plants must surrender to listen to you. Yan Yang, nod your head, adjust your breath, and let go of your burden. Pick up the same hand formula as before, only this time with both hands. When the vines were about to move, the straight index fingers, ring fingers, and little fingers of both hands crossed suddenly. The surrounding vines crawled up like agile brown snakes, entangled the zombies that had escaped for a certain distance layer by layer, and then tightened continuously. When the vines finally dispersed, only a pool of flesh remained in place. Jiang Nanfeng and the others were shocked to see this magical ability. You two have so special abilities, no wonder you are together. This is fate. Jiang Nanfeng shook his head in disbelief. Yan Yang was also surprised that she could do it. That's right, Yan Yang's main ability is the rare plant control technique, and the secondary ability is soil and sand control. It's just that plant control, although very rare and very aggressive, is demanding on levels. If the level is less than 50 or more, you can't let the plants be at your disposal. Therefore, plant control technique is a thorough development system, because before the level is not qualified, this ability is useless, and it is very dangerous for the ability user. Sakura, the way you pinched your fingers just now looks like a little fairy is summoning a spell. Look at it. Wei Ran was still immersed in the scene of Yan Yin using the power just now. Yan Ying shyly covered her face that was slightly hot from excitement. No, the tricks of this ability are just more like fairy arts. And Su Yai held her shoulders and looked at Mu Zicheng and Wei Ran gratefully. Brother Cheng. Xiao Ran. Mu Zicheng still had an indifferent face, but he rarely patted Su Yi's arm. Ran smiled and waved her hand directly. He didn't say the rest, but he knew that Mu Zicheng and Wei Ran understood. What's going on? What is this mess? Why is it so disgusting? The two stewards of the small villa jumped out again. At the moment, no one cares about them. I said, do you still want to eat? The seafood simmering on the stove at home is almost dry, Chen Wei reminded angrily. It was only then that Jiang Nanfeng remembered that his stomach hadn't been filled yet, and he was already beating his drums. Eat, everyone is going home soon, the chef is going to be angry. Two managers, please talk to your people. Let me tell you, the high-level zombies have been dealt with. It is best to give us some supplies so we can come and see each other in the future. The two stewards shouted at Mu Zicheng and his party, who were walking further and further away with blank expressions. What's the matter? Where is it going to be solved, and where is this corpse? And a charming figure flashed in the corner of the wall not far behind the two stewards and then disappeared. Next day. Wei Ran was in the front courtyard pouring some water on the flowers and plants that were about to wither, hoping to make the courtyard more vibrant. Little girl, I'm looking for someone of yours who can make decisions. An arrogant and lazy female voice came from behind her. Holding the water bottle, Wei Ran turned around and saw a charming beauty, wearing a long, tight-fitting down jacket, a pair of seductive single phoenix eyes under the fluffy big waves. The tails of the eyes were slightly raised as if flirting. But, little girl? She looked around to see that there was no one around, and the woman was indeed looking at herself. Wei Ran pointed at herself in a daze. You called me. The woman stroked her hair and smiled. Yes, it's you. Wei Ran casually put down the kettle on the wooden stand and took 2 steps towards the woman, with a half smile on her face. What can you do with my brother? Let's talk about something. Coldness, not as weak as it seems on the surface. Ran. Wei Ran looked at Mu Zicheng, who came out to look for her, and her brows softened in an instant. Mu Zicheng stepped towards her. Why so long? Wei Ran smiled and said, it's over. Then she pouted slightly, raised her chin, and said with a sour taste, there is a beautiful woman who said she wanted to find you. Mu Zicheng chuckled a few times, lowered his head and whispered something in her ear. Wei Ran's face flushed a little, and she said, I hate the woman. The two of them were alone. Is it too much? I brought supplies here, and I would like to thank you for killing the high-level zombies who broke into the base. So, can we talk for a while? The woman broke the tired and crooked two people and said to Mu Zicheng. She remembered that it was this man who was guiding her companions that day. And Mu Zicheng just glanced at her. His dark eyes were full of indifference. In the living room, there are piles of supplies that they handed in when they entered the Snow Mountain base, and now they are returning them one by one. Mu Zicheng sat elegantly and lazily with his legs crossed in the middle of the sofa in the main seat. His bony fingers were casually placed on his knees, rubbing his thumb and index finger. Wearing a pair of plush home shoes, Wei Ran sat obediently beside him with the warm water bottle that Mu Zicheng gave her. Others sat or stood at will. The charming and enchanting woman didn't speak. She wanted to let Mu Zicheng speak first, and wanted to take the lead. She thought that even if Mu Zicheng didn't say anything, other people would ask her if they had questions about these supplies, but she underestimated the brain circuits of this group of people. After a while of silence in the living room, Su Yi broke the silence on purpose. Since this beauty is hard to say, why not leave? She still needs to take a nap. The woman. Immediately when everyone else agreed, even Mu Zicheng was about to leave the living room, they all pulled Wei Ran to get up. The charming and enchanting woman didn't care about whether she took the initiative or not. She stood up all at once. Wait. Jiang Nanfeng and his group took advantage of the situation and sat back. She took a few deep breaths, then raised her hand to shake the big waves that fell on her chest, and looked at Zicheng with charming eyes. I am the manager of this base, Sun Siying. Indifferent, no reaction. Sun Siying continued. A strange-shaped lair appeared in Rongshan. Although it is not within the scope of the Snow Mountain base, it is also on the border. So after thinking twice at our base, we decided to go to Rongshan to destroy the alien lair in order to ensure the safety of everyone who stayed in the base. But there is still a shortage of people. We know that everyone is very high level, so I would like to invite you to go to Rongshan together. The material remuneration is 5 times more than what you paid before, and the monthly rent of this small villa does not need to be increased pay. Chen Wei laughed happily, and he almost gave this beautiful manager of the base a thumbs up, and it was the first time that he could express his selfish desires so heartbreakingly. Chapter 50. This forest is too quiet. Sun Siying doesn't know what the people in the living room are thinking. She thinks that even the lair has the highest risk factor, but the material reward she proposed is also very tempting. After all, in this end of the world, possession of materials is the most important thing. What's more, she had read the information that they entered the base to register at that time, showing that there were 7 people in Zicheng, and the lack of supplies was the reason why he could not refuse. So when Zicheng turned his cold eyes to her, Sun Siying waited for Zicheng's response without changing his face. But who would have thought that he just uttered 3 words silently, I'm not interested. Sun Siying was stunned, but quickly adjusted her mood and recovered as before. You might as well think about it again. After all, you live here too. Hello everyone, if you feel that the materials and the reward are not enough, I can still let you enter the management of the Snow Mountain base. Wei Ran sneered. Sun Siying frowned slightly and looked at her. What are you laughing at? Wei Ran lowered her head and smiled silently. Chen Wei kindly answered the question. Miss Sun, we are just passing by, and we are staying here just to find a place to celebrate the new year. Sun Siying's heart skipped a beat. Does this mean that Zicheng and his party will leave at any time? Chen Wei asked curiously. Miss Sun, are you not afraid that you will encounter a large lair with thousands of aliens? I went into the lair and observed it for a long time. Because there are very few female aliens in this lair, the number is maintained between 100 and 100 and 105. In order to bring the equipment into the lair, she should have lost several superhumans now. If she can't bring out what she wants inside, then her loss will be too great. Wei Ran opened her eyes and looked at Sun Siying with a cold face. Miss Sun, the camera equipment can't be installed in all directions in the nest. How can you be sure that all the aliens in the nest appear under the camera? It will transform the lair into a crisscross pattern. Once inside it is extremely difficult to escape. Wei Ran paused slightly. Then her eyes narrowed, and she continued to say the next sentence with a serious face, so we don't want to go into this muddy water. Sun Siying was surprised that Wei Ran looked so young at such a young age, but she was so sharp and straight to the core. Indeed, she couldn't be sure, but one thing she could be sure of was that it was indeed as dangerous as Wei Ran said, and this was what she said in the last breath of a power user who had desperately escaped from the lair. But in an instant she narrowed her eyes slightly, and a strange light flashed in her eyes. Knowing the structure of the lair, Wei Ran proved that they had definitely been to the lair, otherwise they wouldn't all have passed level 50. Thinking of this, Sun Siying became eager. She wanted to say something but was interrupted by Wei Ran forcefully. Miss Sun, we are really not interested in the nest. Sun Siying also knew that it would be fruitless to talk about it now, so it's better to go back and think about countermeasures. I still hope that Mr. Mu can think about it more, and I hope to wait for Mr. Mu's answer immediately. Sun Siying got up and left the small villa. Sun Siying came here every day to inquire about these past few days, which made Zicheng and his party a little annoyed. It just so happened that they also felt a little bored on the mountain, so they went down the mountain today to wander around for a few days, and by the way, they found out of group aliens to improve their skill experience. After passing Tiangxin Lake at the foot of the mountain, Chen Wei went to see the self-defense team that he forced to become. Not to mention, since the self-defense force became a force, it has been quite decent, but the aliens have not been seen. Zombies have appeared several times, but they were all wiped out by the self-defense force. Later, when the crowd gathered at the foot of the mountain saw that they had really contributed, they voluntarily provided supplies accordingly. This time, the self-defense forces will serve Chen Wei from the bottom of their hearts. When Chen Wei gets into the car, he will send him off at 18. Jiang Nanfeng jokingly said Chen Wei's previous morality and dignity are still applicable in this last world. Chen Wei was about to rush up to beat him, but Jiang Nanfeng quickly showed weakness and said, "Isn't this a compliment for you being a fool?" Chen Wei scolded angrily, "Get out." They also walked without purpose, and the off-road RV drove wherever they wanted. The day after I came out, it started to rain lightly, and it was especially cold. Winter in the south is wet and cold, while in the north it is dry and cold. Wei Ran was afraid of the cold and couldn't adapt to the weather for a while, so her body and feet were covered with warm babies. This warm baby was specially prepared by Zicheng for her, knowing that she was afraid of the cold. Guming drove the caravan past the foot of a remote forest mountain, saw that there was a road that could be driven up the mountain, and drove directly up. Zicheng felt that there was nothing wrong with the surrounding area, it was very quiet and clean. But he didn't make a sound. Wei Ran covered his hand and asked softly, "What's the matter? Is there any abnormal shape around here?" Zicheng shook his head slightly, and his faint eyes turned to the smoke outside the window. "No, it's very clean." Then he added one sentence. "But ... it's too quiet." Hearing Zicheng's words, the people in the car realized that the RV had already driven halfway up the mountain, but there was no sound of birds and insects in this forest, which was too eerie. They drove to the middle of the mountain and never went on the road again. After stopping in an overgrown field, they got out of the car to look around. Wei Ran pulled Zicheng to observe the road that drove up. "Brother, someone should have opened up wasteland here before, but I don't know why it was only halfway opened, and the fog is too heavy. There is a layer of smoke here, a layer of denseness poured over, coupled with the dense vegetation, which almost blocked the line of sight. Wei Ran could only see the scene within 1 meter. Zicheng held her hand tightly. "Follow me closely." Because of the blessing of supernatural powers, these obstructions were not a problem for Zicheng. He saw a wooden house about 10 meters away. Pull Wei Ran over. The wooden house was in a mess, and there were many objects scattered on the ground, and there were even coins in these objects. Wei Ran vaguely saw a lot of objects on the ground, and she looked at Zicheng. Could it be that someone has come here to search for supplies? Zicheng saw a bag of rice and noodles in the corner, and his eyes were serious. "No, even rice and noodles are there, which proves that no one has been here after the end of the world. And money is falling on the ground. This means that the people in this wooden house evacuated before the end of the world." He looked at the messy items on the ground again, added a sentence, "It should be something very scary, and I didn't even have time to get the money." Zicheng and Wei Ran returned to the grassy clearing before, but found that Guming and the other 5 were gone, only the caravan was left. "They're gone." Zicheng looked around sullenly, but there was no sign of them. Wei Ran's heart skipped a beat. "Sakura! Guming!" Nanfeng Wei Ran shouted into the distance. But all she could get was echoes one by one. Wei Ran frowned and looked at Zicheng. "Brother, something must have happened to them." Zicheng noticed an unnoticed path ahead, and seemed to hear something and squeezed Wei Ran's hand. Wei Ran's heart sank. Of course, also hold his hand tightly. Then the two walked directly through the half-waist high grass, walked into the hidden path, and disappeared into the smoke. Chapter 51. After the strange smoke. Enters the path, there are jungle bushes. But it was strange that Zicheng couldn't hear any other voices, not at all. At this time he flashed the picture when he got off the car. The first time he got off the car, he saw that there was no path around the RV, but after returning to the RV again, this hidden path appeared strangely next to it. Also, although the smoke can be seen clearly at this time, nothing else can be seen, and there is no sound other than the two of them. What's the problem? Ran, follow me closely. Zicheng held her hand tightly, refusing to relax. Brother. I feel something is wrong. It seems that the air is thin, and I can't breathe. Ran was a little dizzy and gasped slightly. Og. Why? Ran's words woke Zicheng up. He hugged Ran and pinched his fingers to call out the protective cover, protected the two of them, and then took out 2 bottles of body function recovery water from Ran's equipment bag and fed them to Ran to drink. Ran, are you feeling better now? He stroked her fair and delicate face. At this time, Ran had recovered as before, nodded, but was puzzled. It's strange, the feeling of being breathless disappeared when I was inside the protective cover. There was something strange in the grass. He walked over and knelt down to pick up the scattered grass and smell it. There are obvious signs of procrastination here. The grass here has been torn off recently, and there is a smell of fresh grass. Ran wondered, could someone still make traps here? No, she suddenly thought of Yan, Cherry. Sakura is with them. The whole forest is full of plants. They are supposed to be absolutely safe, and they will join us as soon as possible. But now... She looked at Zicheng solemnly. They are controlled by plants. Zicheng's black eyes were cold and stern. Yes, this forest is not simple. Just now you said that it was difficult to breathe, which reminded me that the fog is weird. The path we just came in actually didn't exist at all. Road. Shortly after we got off the car, we have been deluded by this thick smoke. This fog not only makes people hallucinate, but also creates a barrier to isolate people and things at a certain distance. Ran, take out the gas mask. As long as you block the inhalation, you will no longer be invaded by the poisonous mist. After putting on half of the gas mask, Zicheng seemed to hear the faint cracking sound again. He closed his eyes, turned his head slightly, and listened carefully to identify the direction of the sound. And Ran held a gun in the other hand for vigilance. Suddenly he opened his eyelids and looked coldly at the distance to the right over there. Then he hugged Ran's slender waist with one hand and teleported with his mental consciousness. And the other side goes back to not so long ago. Yang was originally with Su Yi and the others, but she turned around inadvertently and the smoke filled her, and when she turned around there was no sign of Su Yi and the others. Ai. He even shouted a few times, but there was no response. Logically speaking, he just disappeared and shouldn't be so far away from them. The smoke was so thick that she couldn't even see her palms clearly, and she quickly lost consciousness and fell to the ground. Suddenly, something wrapped around her ankles, and she was quickly delayed somewhere. When passing by the grass, Yan subconsciously tugged on the grass to try to stop herself, but it didn't help. She murmured Xiao ran. Just as she was about to be dragged into the dense vegetation, the thick vine was blown off, and the remaining vine quickly retracted into the dense jungle and disappeared. Zicheng and Ran walked over quickly, called out the protective cover, and blocked the poisonous fog first, and then Ran gave her the antidote and body function recovery water. Soon Yan woke up. When she saw Ran, she immediately grabbed Ran's arm and said eagerly, "Xiao Ran, yi," and I got separated. Ran patted her hand to comfort her, and then handed her the gas mask. Put this on first. After seeing Yan put on the mask, Zicheng asked, "What's the matter?" The physique, the memory is somewhat interrupted. She thought for a while before recalling. After getting off the RV, we were together all the time. Suddenly I heard you and Xiao Ran shouting in front of me. I thought something happened to you, so I immediately chased after the sound. But after chasing for a while I realized that something was wrong. I used my ability to control the plants to search for your tracks. But it was strange that none of the plants responded to me, not even the wheatgrass. Ran frowned. Looking at Zicheng, he was worried about Gu Ming and the others. Zicheng used telepathy several times but did not hear any sound. Although the gas mask has separated the smoke, people will no longer be psychedelic by it, but the barrier still exists and it still isolates anyone and everything at a certain distance. The fact that Zicheng couldn't hear Gu Ming and the others' voices proved that they were not nearby. He pondered for a while, then looked coldly into the depths of the forest. Go inside. Zicheng, Wei Ran, and Yan Yang walked through the dense forest to an empty space with only trees and a layer of vegetation on the ground. Liao flat. Wei Ran was afraid that she would get separated from Yan Yang, so she took a piece of cloth and tied her in Yan Yang's hands. The two of them were about to walk over, but Zicheng stopped him suddenly. He picked up a stone and threw it forward, but no sound was heard. He had a stern expression on his face. This is a forest swamp. It looks flat, but it's actually unfathomable. Wei Ran and Yan hurriedly drew back their feet, feeling scared for a while. Forest swamps are littered branches and leaves that have fallen on the ground for many years and accumulated layer after layer to accumulate a large amount of rainwater, reduce the evaporation of soil water, keep it in an over-humid state, and allow a large number of bryophytes to flourish. So it may be that one foot is on flat ground, and the next foot is a deep pit. It is impossible to know whether the deep pit is water, mud, or empty. The swamps that can form forests are extremely inaccessible places, and this forest was detected by the detection team a year ago to be rich in minerals, so they organized people to open the way to the middle of the mountain to plan to excavate. But I did not expect to encounter strange incidents of life and death. Had to evacuate. Zicheng also couldn't teleport with his consciousness, because there was no definite stop point. If he found a place at random, what would happen if it was still a swamp? He could only pull Wei Ran along the swamp. Let's go around this swamp. After a while of wrestling, two vines that were as thick as a man's arms rushed straight at Wei Ran. Zicheng quickly pinched his fingers to summon the shield and bounced it away. The two vines on the side that were bounced off slowly intertwined, like a bowl. The big snake stood upright. There is a bright red flower bud on the top that opens suddenly, in the shape of a five-pointed star. Each corner has 2 rows of sharp saw teeth, and there are 2 rows of staggered fangs in the middle, making a slight hissing sound. It seems that this forest is controlled by this mutated plant. Zicheng looked sharply at the weird vine. Chapter 52. Zicheng's inaccessibility. The two vines rushed over, still only heading towards Wei Ran, but stopped 3 meters away from Wei Ran. Zicheng locked the vine with his spiritual consciousness and couldn't move. This vine knows that I don't have supernatural powers, and has analyzed the attacks well. Wei Ran analyzed the 2 attacks. Yan Yang looked worried. It's possible. If it can control the entire forest for its use, then all the plants we pass by will collect information. Tell it one by one. The plant department is so incredible. Wei Ran was dumbfounded. She didn't expect plants to be so cunning. Zicheng felt that although the vines had been restrained, there was still a powerful force competing with him, intending to break free and escape. He pondered for a while and released his control over them. The 2 vines quickly retracted into the swamp and disappeared. Wei Ran asked, puzzledly, brother, why did you let them go? Zicheng slowly turned his cold eyes and looked around. Those are just its branches. Let them go to find its main body. And the main body. But Wei Ran wanted to tell him, but noticed that the poisonous mist began to recede. As the smoke dissipated, the barrier retreated. This time Zicheng was finally able to clearly hear the location of their voices, and his eyes were cold. We found them in an instant. Zicheng, Wei Ran, and Yan Yang disappeared in the forest and swamp. Damn, what the hell are these things? They are everywhere along this road. Zhang Nanfeng tied a strip of cloth ripped from his clothes to his face. Although it cannot be completely cut off, it is better than nothing, and it can also play a role in slowing down. Jiang Nanfeng called out the ice knife to cut off the vines that flew behind Zhu Ming. That's too much. Several vines entangled Su Yi, and he summoned his strength to gather his arms, and then he struggled, and the vines wrapped around him broke into several pieces. Gu Ming saw another 7 or 8 coming from the other side. He retracted his thumb into his palm, pointed his 4 fingers upwards, and then made a fist and punched the grass. Suddenly several thunderbolts crawled over the ground, and then turned into coke with a boom in the surging vines. Chen Wei summoned flames and burned a few of them to ashes, panting, "This vine just wants to wear down our abilities, it's too bad for us. I don't know what happened to Brother Chang and the others. They came in such a hurry that they didn't even equip. I didn't take the bag, and I was fighting with my abilities at the moment. Even though they are now about to break through the 100th level, and the power consumption and maintenance speed have been greatly improved compared to before, they cannot withstand such endless attacks after all. What's more, they have been entangled with this pile of vines for a long time, and half of their abilities have been consumed." At this time, Chen Wei was inadvertently entangled by the vines behind him, and several vines flew over with zigzags in front of him. The sawtooth of the mutated vine appeared in Chen Wei's pupils. "Chen Wei!" Jiang Nanfeng shouted. Su Yi teleported beside Chen Wei, tore off the vines wrapped around Chen Wei, and took him to a safe place. At the same time, bang! An explosion sounded behind them. Chen Wei and Su Yi looked back and found that the mutated vines that had just flown towards Chen Wei had been shattered. Immediately afterwards, they found that the surrounding vines were no longer moving. Mental awareness control. And Zicheng is not far away. Brother Cheng Guming and the others shouted in surprise. Jiang Nanfeng was even more embarrassed. "My brother Chang is here, and I tell you, you are finished. You are finished." Go on. Wei ran through the gun to Guming and Jiang Nanfeng. After Guming and Jiang Nanfeng followed up with their guns, they fired wildly and smashed the stagnant vines to pieces. Yan Ying walked quickly to Su Yi. Su Yi went up to meet her and asked eagerly, "Are you okay?" Yan Ying shook her head. "Fortunately, I met Brother Cheng and Jiao Ran, so there was no danger." Su Yi was relieved. The 7 scattered people were finally able to gather. Zicheng felt that powerful force trying to break through his confinement again. He lifted the restraint, and the vines quickly retreated into the dense forest. Guming didn't understand, so he said, "Brother Cheng, what is this?" Zicheng's eyes were cold and stern, and he said with a hint of amusement, "Since it is trying so hard to lure us over, it doesn't make sense not to play with it." Zicheng Chengshen walked to the deepest part of the forest with the sense of the vines that had been let go. Along the way, vines came to obstruct and attack, but Zicheng controlled them one by one. After walking for more than 20 minutes, pushing away the 2-meter-high Kongzai, a huge 20-meter-high tree appeared in front of Zicheng and his party. It looks like a tree but doesn't look like a tree, but the vines are too tall. There are countless small vines floating on each branch, and there are countless vines entwined around the root. It takes nearly 10 people to hug the one with the thick waist. "What is this?" Su Yi was surprised. Zicheng narrowed his eyes slightly. "A 1,000-year-old banyan tree. What has been attacking us is not its vines, but its aerial roots. After so many years, its aerial roots have already been in every corner of this forest. The smoke we started with was produced by its air roots." Jiang Nanfeng said angrily, "I'll go. Fortunately, we found something wrong with the smoke, otherwise it would have succeeded. This old man, Chen Wei, hurry up, burn it up." Chen Wei stared at him. Annoyed, I said, "Nanfeng, can you think of me better? What about him? How big is a tree? You want me to die?" At this moment, a gust of cold wind passed by. "It's kind of dangerous." The ground seemed to vibrate slightly. "Be careful. The 1,000-year-old banyan tree has moved," Wei Ran said with a slight frown. Zicheng's eyes were stern, and he ordered with a cold face, "Stay back." Wei Ran clenched her fists tightly. Although there was worry in her eyes, she understood why Zicheng had to deal with it alone. Can't deal with it, only spiritual consciousness can control it. But Guming and the others have been fighting together for so long, knowing that Zicheng must have his reasons for letting them retreat, so he didn't say anything sensational about staying and fighting together. Following instructions is the best help at this time. Just as they retreated to a safe distance, a protective shield glowing with silver light protected them tightly. And at the moment when the protective cover was summoned, countless banyan roots in the ground broke through the ground and attacked Zicheng. They also attacked the protective shield at the same time, but they were already bounced off by the protective shield when they were 3 meters away from the protective shield, and they couldn't even get close. Wei ran and the others were suddenly surprised. They still remembered that when the protective cover appeared before, the zombies could get as close as a millimeter of the protective cover, but now they couldn't even get close. Zicheng was already so strong that no one could match him. The banyan roots of the body are more aggressive than the branches of the banyan roots they encountered before. With the power of the body, the banyan roots burst into fangs and flew to attack Zicheng from all directions. Seeing that Zicheng was about to be attacked, everyone in the protective shield was sweating. Chapter 53. Suddenly, Zicheng disappeared with the teleportation. The thick banyan trees flying from all directions rushed to the place where Zicheng was standing before, all intertwined with each other. That scene was creepy, it looked like a huge snake den. Zicheng immediately appeared not far away, and made a decisive gesture. The intertwined banyan roots that looked like a snake's cave flashed with a few icy blue lights, and instantly turned into a pile of cut logs, unable to move anymore. Another pile of thick banyan roots flew over. Zicheng jumped over. When they rushed over again, he stretched out his slender hand with distinct bony fingers, palm facing outward, and spread out his 5 fingers. Those dozens of banyan roots stagnated in mid-air. Immediately afterwards, a strange scene appeared. The dozens of them turned their guns and opened their fangs and pounced on their own kind. But soon the dozens of them were eaten up by hundreds of banyan roots released by the 1,000-year-old banyan tree. After Zicheng did this several times, he found that it was useless to use the same kind to fight each other, because soon there would be more than twice as many banyan roots coming out. At this time, dozens more twisted and flew from behind him. He slightly tilted his head and looked sideways, and immediately turned his palms inwards, with his left palm in front of his right palm, his 2 thumbs facing each other, and his right fist formed into a fist, and suddenly he pulled out a silvery, about 1 meter long blade similar to the Zicheng knife. And those banyan roots with their fangs are almost behind them. Zicheng suddenly turned around and leaned back at a 45-degree angle. Immediately, dozens of banyan roots flew past him. He jumped up from the side and at the same time swung his knife from bottom to top. The roots of the banyan tree were cut off. Zicheng immediately teleported to the front of the 1,000-year-old banyan tree with a serious expression on his face. This 1,000-year-old banyan tree has lived for too long, and has become refined and has its own consciousness. Although the main body is here, the banyan roots have spread all over every corner, and there is no way to destroy it, and it knows that it can't beat you. Obviously, it just wants to consume you and consume you to death. He thought for a while, and a coldness flashed in his eyes. If so, it will swallow you. Zicheng withdrew his sharp blade, but he disappeared in the blink of an eye. Ming and the others looked around but found nothing. Wei frowned. Brother Cheng, why is it gone? He is here, but we can no longer see his speed with our naked eyes. But this 1,000-year-old tree monster can sense it. You see, the 1,000-year-old banyan tree is still trying to block at him. Wei Ran stared at the old tree monster's movements sharply. After what Wei Ran said, Wei and the others could see clearly what the old tree monster was chasing with hundreds of banyan roots. Although they sensed Zicheng, they couldn't catch up. Looking at the location where the old tree monster was chasing, Zicheng kept staying in every corner of the 1,000-year-old banyan tree. This scene seems familiar. Brother Cheng, the shocking scene at Huaxia Hospital came to Ming's mind. But Su Yiyai and Yan looked at Ming with suspicion. Wei Ran stared at Rong Zhen's backtracking every time with a serious face. Yes, brother is calling. Is it ... the one who killed more than 500 zombies at once last time? Jiang Ninfeng swallowed hard. Su Yiyai and Yan looked at Wei Ran in shock. But Wei Ran shook his head. I don't know either. The formations in the spiritual consciousness ability are just a general term, and there are low-level and high-level formations in the formation. How many formations there are and how to use them are all based on the spiritual consciousness ability, the ability of the author himself to unlock. Although some spiritual consciousness users have unlocked the array after level 100, the spiritual consciousness ability is not only to upgrade the ability, but the most important thing is to test the understanding. So some of them may only be in the wandering around in the low-level formation. She paused slightly, her cold eyes looked at the 1,000-year-old banyan tree, and she seemed to see farther away. There are also people who unlocked the formation in the previous life, but the only person who can activate the most powerful formation is Zicheng. At this time, Zicheng's tall and straight figure returned to the front, not far from the 1,000-year-old banyan tree, and he quickly picked up and kept changing the complicated instructions. Every time he pinched a finger, the position where he had stayed would glow with ice blue light. And just when the last one was awakened, hundreds of banyan roots suddenly surged up and flew towards Zicheng. Just when they thought that Zicheng would escape, Zicheng let the overwhelming banyan roots completely wrap him up, tightly entangled and tightened continuously. Elder brother. At that moment, Wei Ran seemed to have stopped her heartbeat and subconsciously took 2 steps forward. Brother Chung Chen Wei and the others yelled in horror and wanted to rush out of the protective shield, but were stopped by Wei Ran, who was standing in front. Go back. If you still can't take a step closer, then it proves that brother is safe. Her eyes were cold and stern. The reason why brother summoned the protective shield is to make him have no worries, so we must not go out to distract him. Just now she also thought the protective cover, but when her hand touched the protective cover, the micro shock on the surface of the protective cover caused by the transmission of the ability woke her up. Zicheng is no different. Look, the last one is also lit up, Yan Ying shouted, pointing to the front. They looked over suddenly, and indeed the last direction was also covered with ice blue. Then an explosion drew their attention to Zicheng. I saw that the thousands of banyan roots that had been entangled with Zicheng before were smashed, and Zicheng was safe and sound in the protective cover, pinching the last summoning finger. Wei Ran and the others were surprised that Zicheng was able to summon protective shields. But at this moment, Zicheng's eyes were dark and cold. One hand is up, the other is down, the middle fingers of both hands are touching the nameless, and the 4 fingers are clasped together. Fight array, hold back A. Chill escaped from the thin lips. As soon as the words fell, the various directions in the formation quickly formed a swallowing formation and slowly rotated on the ground, glowing with ice blue light. There were various traditional characters and spells in the formation, but it looked like a spell, and that burst of heart is the 1,000-year-old banyan tree. Wei Ran and the others noticed that the surrounding banyan roots stopped attacking and put away the buds and stayed where they were. Suddenly, the 1,000-year-old banyan tree seemed to be constantly struggling and trembling, while the icy blue phagocytic formation slowly turned, slowly floating a dense layer of cosmic starlight. But after a while, another gust of wind and spring came out from the ground, and with those dots of starlight, it circled up the 1,000-year-old banyan tree and reached the top. Then the white light swooped towards Zicheng again, and the white light overflowed in an instant. But only for a moment, the white light entered Zicheng's body without any leakage. This time, 60% of the cultivation base of the 1,000-year-old tree monster was swallowed up by Zicheng, and turned into a power level that increased Zicheng. Wei Ran and the others were also blinded by the strong white light. When they felt the white light dissipate, they opened their eyes and looked. The front had already recovered. The 1,000-year-old banyan tree didn't seem to have changed, but they noticed that the banyan root that attacked them just now had turned back into an ordinary banyan tree aerial root. The protective shields protecting them also disappeared. Wei Ran hurried over to Zicheng's side to take a closer look and found that Zicheng's face was as usual, so she was relieved. While maintaining Wei Ran's protective shield and activating the god-level skill array, they can also create another protective shield. These are extremely power-consuming. In particular, the premise of summoning the formation is supported by the supernatural power of the formation builder, and usually one formation is almost enough to make the supernatural power remnant. But now Zicheng's power consumption rate is less than half. Yan Ying, make a contract with this old monster, let it guard this rich mineral mountain for us, Zicheng said calmly, tilting his head slightly and looking sideways. One of the skills in plant control technique is the contract technique, which is to meet this kind of extremely rare spooky plant and surrender it to oneself and sign a contract with it for its own use only. If the contract is violated, the plants will suffer backlash. And the purpose of Zicheng leaving 40% of his cultivation to it is to let it guard the extremely rich minerals in this forest. But I couldn't even call a single grass in this forest before Yan Yang recalled that she had been summoned many times before. If it doesn't want to, you can tell it. Zicheng stared coldly at the 1,000-year-old banyan tree and smiled sinisterly. Then I'll let it become an ancient tree through and through. Chapter 54. Ming strayed into the vicinity of Rongshan Mountain and the others were chased by the banyan roots of the old tree monster all day. They were a little tired after all the tossing, so they decided to stay in the forest for the night. Chen Wei grilled some fish and 2 chickens, and Wei Ran took out a large pot of deer blood rice that was still steaming. This is what Chen Wei put into the storage space as a defender before. Ming glanced at the 1,000-year-old banyan tree behind him, and was still a little puzzled, so he asked, "Brother Cheng, from the end of the world until now we have never encountered a mutant plant. Why did we encounter this old tree monster?" Zicheng tore off the chicken leg from the roast chicken and handed it to Wei Ran, saying, "It didn't mutate in the last days, nor did it mutate because it lived for 1,000 years. It's just that there is a huge meteorite under its body, plus the entire deep forest is full of minerals, and the special substances released by the two superimpose each other to make this 1,000-year-old banyan tree mutate slowly over the long thousands of years. Meteorites and mineral radioactive substances penetrate into the 1,000-year-old banyan tree, so before the hallucinatory smoke is indeed emitted from the air roots of this banyan tree." Su Yi still felt incredible. It turns out that there are really scenes like scenes from horror movies, and there are so many wonders in the world. Chen Wei snorted. "Your little cherry can still keep the old tree monster under his bag. This is considered a magic spell. Is there anything more rare than this?" Yan Ying said solemnly, No, how can I be capable? Subdue it, it's Brother Cheng. It succumbed to Brother Cheng's threat and was aggrieved when it signed the contract." A group of people became happy again when they heard the words. And Zhang Nanfeng kept silent. Don't look at how ruthless he was to Ronggin during the day. Look at what he was afraid of. But at this moment he turned his head and glanced at He Galongdong behind him, as if something strange would happen in the next second. He hurriedly turned around and moved closer to Ming, who was sitting next to him, and asked Zicheng, "Brother Cheng, you said that this forest is so weird, will there be other spirits coming out?" Chen Wei glanced at him again. "I said, Nanfeng, you are afraid of ghosts again, aren't you, Jiang Nanfeng?" Immediately sat up straight and raised his voice solemnly. "HMP. You are joking, I will be afraid. You let it come out, I'll freeze it to death." Ha ha ha! Everyone was amused by Jiang Nanfeng's posturing. Jiang Nanfeng turned to Ming with a little inadvertent grievance. "I'm really not afraid." Ming handed him the prepared fish, and nodded calmly. "Asham. No wonder. I just said how come there are mutated plants in this apocalypse." Wei Ran took a bite of the chicken leg, and said something vaguely subconsciously. The others didn't hear Wei Ran's words clearly, but Zicheng heard them clearly. He looked at Wei Ran beside him. A flash of pain flashed in his eyes, and he couldn't help stroking her heart. Wei Ran raised his head to reveal his favorite little dimple, coquettishly. "I still want to eat fish without bones." With her appearance, even if she wanted the moon in the sky, he would try his best to get it for her. Because the off-road RV is still in the middle of the mountain, Wei Ran took out the Element Palazzo RV again tonight. Although it is said that the 1,000-year-old banyan tree has been used by them, for absolute safety and for everyone to have a good night's sleep tonight, Ming still installed a laser protection net. Wei Ran took out some red fruits for Ming and the others to eat, especially since Ming and the others were about to break through level 100. Level 100 is a big difficulty, so it will be slower than the previous level, but with the blessing of red fruits, it should be reached soon. There are also Su Yi and Yan Yang who are nearly 70 levels and nearly 60 levels respectively. After Wei Ran returned to the room after taking a shower, Zicheng, who had showered half an hour later, also came in. She quickly took out several balls and handed them to his eyes. Zicheng looked at the meatball, and then looked at her. Wei Ran didn't pay attention to his expression but said to herself, "This is a tonic for the body and health that I made from the herbs in the secret realm. You have absorbed 60% of the cultivation base of the 1,000-year-old banyan tree today, which may cause serious damage. Confusion in your internal breath causes your body to be weak, and this pill can help you adjust your body as soon as possible." She took out another bottle of water, and seeing that Zicheng hadn't spoken, she looked up at him and blinked her eyes in confusion. I saw Zicheng looking at her quietly, and said sinisterly, "Tonight I will let you know whether I am weak or not." After some dangling exercises, Wei Ran fell into a deep sleep with slow breathing go. Zicheng hugged her tightly and stretched out his hand to rub her forehead with broken bangs. Slender and clean fingers slid across her fair little face, especially from the forehead to the high bridge of the nose to the corner of the mouth. The thin lips were pampering and gently kissing these places back and forth, as if any extra force would hurt her. He looked at Wei Ran's eyes showing pain again, and when his dark eyes slowly turned out of the window, they turned cold again. Ran, no matter what life it is, none of those who make you hurt can escape. The next day. After Zicheng and his party packed up, the group didn't want to waste a few more hours and went out, and teleported directly to the off-road RV in the middle of the mountain. Before returning to the foot of the mountain, Wei Ran looked back, and the mountain was filled with heavy smoke again. I said, "We have been out for almost a week, are you considering returning?" Jiang Nanfeng's words reminded everyone that the Chinese New Year is approaching and the return journey will take several days. They really have to return, so they decided to start from another way to swim and go back. Because the roads are all flat these days, Wei Ran replaced the off-road RV with an element palazzo RV so that everyone can have a comfortable trip before going back. 2 days later, in the evening, they drove the element palazzo through an abandoned orchard. The fruit trees inside had already withered because no one took care of it. They thought that, although the orchard had a small bungalow outside, it was a mess inside, so they didn't bother to take care of it, and it was more comfortable to live in an RV. Chen Wei lit the fire before dark, while Gu Ming just wanted to jump onto the roof of the RV and install a laser protective net. Zicheng stopped Gu Ming. He squinted slightly and looked into the distance. "Don't pretend, there are about 30 people coming here from 2 kilometers away." About 15 minutes later, 7 cars also drove into the other side of the orchard, and the leader of the car opened the door, and it was Sun Siying with wavy long hair and enchanting. After Sun Siying got out of the car, she saw Zicheng and his group sitting around the fire, with a look of astonishment on her face. A cold light flashed in her eyes again, and then she raised her red lips and walked towards him mockingly. "Zicheng, you said that you are not interested in entering the lair, but now we meet in the surrounding counties of Rongshan Mountain." Wei Ran and the others were at a loss and looked at each other in blank dismay. Rongshan? Chen Wei glared at Jiang Nanfeng. "Haven't you been watching the satellite positioning all the time? Why did you run to the vicinity of Rongshan?" Jiang Nanfeng laughed a few times. "When I watched the satellite 2 days ago, I only watched the straight line. You can go back to the Snow Mountain base by a long road, so you don't even notice the places around you." Chen Wei rolled his eyes speechlessly. Chapter 55. Someone is coming. Sun Siying frowned as she watched the group of people talking nonsense, thinking that they were completely covering up and wanted to swallow the egg liquid for themselves. Zicheng cast her a cold look, as if he was too lazy to talk to her. Sun Siying was annoyed by Zicheng's contempt. Miss Sun Wei Ran put her chin on Zicheng's shoulder and blinked her pure eyes at Sun Siying. "My brother means that I really have no interest in egg liquid." Sun Siying would not believe this. She snorted coldly and turned to leave. After Sun Siying left, Wei Ran raised her eyes to Zicheng. "Brother, shall we turn around?" Jiang Nanfeng looked at the route carefully with a satellite GPS, and said with a troubled face, "We have been walking on this road for 2 days. If you turn around at this time, you won't be able to catch up with the New Year's Eve." The Snow Mountain base, which was only visited for the New Year, and the small villa have already been arranged in the same way as before, so these thoughts cannot be put on hold. Everyone is looking forward to celebrating the new year together this time. Zicheng rubbed Wei Ran's slender shoulders and said to them, "It's okay to continue walking on this road. These 2 days have been severe cold and severe winter, and even if they pass through the lair, they should be unwilling to come out. As for the real meeting, then see one and kill one. There are a lot of people from Sun Siying tonight, and it is inconvenient for them to cook anything. That is to say, a pot of wild mushroom soup was boiled, and a box of self-heating rice was served for the meal." Wei Ran took her lunchbox and quietly turned her back to Zicheng, who was talking with Chen Wei and Gu Ming, and then picked carrots that she didn't like to eat in Zicheng's lunchbox. She never liked carrots since she was a child. Zicheng's mother tried many methods but failed to make her give up her dislike for carrots. In fact, she really didn't like the taste. Later, after she and Zicheng got together, Zicheng also wanted to get rid of her bad habit, but he just didn't succeed. Just when she was picking it up, Ran. Wei Ran thumped in fright. Then she pursed her mouth and slowly turned to face Zicheng, who was standing behind her, lowered her head with the boxed lunch in both hands, and secretly cast a few glances at Zicheng. The appearance of being found out for doing something wrong. "Brother." Zicheng sighed helplessly at her. He took the self-heating lunchbox in her hand and carefully picked out every carrot in it for her, and then put the vegetables in his lunchbox into her lunchbox, so that she could have a normal mix of meat and vegetables. Wei Ran hugged Zicheng's strong arm with a smile. "Brother is the best." Zicheng laughed angrily. "Why? It's best if you know how to pick carrots, but usually it's not good." "Of course not. Well, Zicheng is only good to Wei Ran every day and every moment. Wei Ran will flatter Zicheng so that he won't have to eat this stinky carrot in the future without blushing." Zicheng raised his sword eyebrows and lowered his eyes to catch the sly gleam in her eyes. How could he not know what she was thinking at the moment, and he shook his head slightly dotingly. It was still dark after dinner. Wei Ran told Zicheng that he wanted to walk to refresh himself, so he took Wei Ran inside to the large fruit forest. She pulled Zicheng to sit on a stone bench, watching the sunset in dusk. Maybe people would feel a little sad in this scene. She thought of the chaos in the last days, and she asked Zicheng, "Brother, if this is always the case in the future, what should we do?" In the previous life until her death, there were still many aliens, so people lived in no fixed place, and the life of wandering was the most common. Zicheng tightened the collar of her coat to ensure that the wind would not leak in, then hugged her tightly to his firm chest, and kissed her heart. The soft voice was especially deep and sweet. "We will definitely find a place to settle down in the future and rebuild our own homeland." Wei Ran was afraid that Zicheng would misunderstand what she meant, so she looked up in Zicheng's arms and saw with a thin jaw. He said, "I'm not afraid of the days when I'm walking around. As long as I'm by my side, I can do anything." Zicheng lowered his head slightly, his eyes soft, and he smiled a few times, patted her on the back a few times. "I know. But I also want to give you a stable life. I must give you a home." Wei Ran smiled with her eyes bent into crescents. She knew what Zicheng meant by home. It was his most solemn promise to her. Zicheng lowered his head to look for her delicate pink lips in his arms, while Wei Ran kept avoiding him mischievously. He frowned slightly and looked at her with a snort. He, someone is coming." Zicheng's eyes lighted up, and indeed some people came not far away. But he didn't know what he thought of. A flash of light flashed in his eyes. He stood up suddenly, and then pulled Wei Ran, who was in a daze. He dragged her all the way to the small bungalow. A silver light passed by. Why? Zicheng pushed her against the wall, and in the next second he restrained her slender waist, grabbed her delicate lips, and lingered on her remaining words. His big, warm hands ran up her tights-clad legs against her delicate pout. Then he pokes into the corner of her clothes. The rough fingertips gently rubbed her delicate and smooth body, making her tremble uncontrollably. At this time, the conversation outside the small bungalow became more and more clear, and the group of people who were far away were getting closer and closer. Wei Ran struggled with the last bit of reason, and pushed him away with the last bit of strength, but it was only a millimeter. Zicheng panted slightly and pressed his forehead against her, his broad and hard chest pressed against Wei Ran's chest. He looked at the corners of her crimson-colored eyes. The eyes glistened with the desire to refuse or welcome, and the Qiu Yan in the slightly torn collar was looming. The dark color in Zicheng's eyes suddenly became thicker. Swish. The zipper of Wei Ran's down jacket was pulled down. She was wearing a loose sweater and a tight base layer underneath, but the tight base layer was bulging. She wanted to stop it, but she didn't have any strength at all, and the suppressed groans overflowed from the gap between her clenched pink lips. It was freezing winter outside, but Wei Ran's forehead was gradually sweating. Zicheng pinched her soft waist and suddenly turned her to face the wall, and soon his warm chest pressed against it again. Pulling off the sweater on her shoulders, revealing her smooth and delicate shoulders, she lowered her head and tasted the kiss carefully. He followed her ear back and forth to linger, getting closer and closer to her. After a while, a dark and almost hoarse voice came to her ears, "Will you give it?" At this time, Wei Ran still has no will to speak of, clutching the wall tightly with his hands. His face was blushing, his eyes were half closed unconsciously. "It's so nice. I like it." Zicheng said something that made people blush while clinging to her ear-love words. Wei Ran didn't know how she got back to the RV in the end, but she just remembered the terrifying energy with which he seemed to eat her alive at that moment.